Crisis at the BBC. Match of the Day will air with no presenter or pundits after a revolt following the suspension of Gary Lineker. The BBC's highest paid star made it clear he stood by his tweet on the government's language around its migrant boats plan. The BBC made it clear it wouldn't stand for it. Ian Wright led other pundits and presenters in saying they would step aside too in solidarity, backing the Beeb's Director General into a corner.
I absolutely respect people's right to make that decision, and BBC Sport have to look at the programme they're going to produce for the weekend.
It's a story which goes to the very heart of the debate about impartiality and free speech. It's why the Director General is facing arguably his biggest test yet. Meanwhile, the man whose plans effectively triggered the row finds new bromance with the French president and announces millions for beach patrols and a new migrant detention centre in France. Also tonight, the terrible aftermath of the Hamburg shooting, 7 dead, including an unborn baby. Living in mortal fear, Lucy speaks to Iranian dissidents in hiding in Turkey, knowing the regime will pursue them no matter what. And
there's an awful lot of Irish people here tonight. Thank God.
Why Irish eyes could be smiling at the Oscars. Nina is there ahead of Sunday's ceremony.
I'm in shock, really, and I'm just so proud and I'm so excited for Ireland.
This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. It's hard to imagine how the BBC could spiral faster into full-blown crisis than it has tonight. Just hours ago, Gary Lineker was set to present Match of the Day tomorrow, having stood by his tweet comparing the government's language on its new small boats policy to that used in 1930s Germany. Now the show will go ahead, but with no presenter or pundits at all. That after the BBC asked its star to step back from anchoring the show, and then one by one his on-screen colleagues ruling out appearing in solidarity. Unsurprisingly, politicians and pundits from across the spectrum have weighed in, some saying Lineker quite clearly breached the BBC's duty to impartiality. Others point out that the same corporation has a chairman who failed to declare his role in helping Boris Johnson get an £800,000 loan and allowed Lord Sugar to present The Apprentice despite urging people not to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. One tweet about the government's small boats policy has put the BBC and its Director General on the stormiest of seas.
The gap widened again on Wednesday. 7 games for you on Match of the Day tonight, including the top 2.
It's a seat Gary Lineker won't be sitting in this Saturday night. The Match of the Day host has been asked by the BBC to step back while it tries to deal with the controversy surrounding his remarks on the government's new asylum policy. A statement said the BBC has decided that he will step back from presenting Match of the Day until we've got an agreed and clear position on his use of social media. We have never said that Gary should be an opinion-free zone, but we have said that he should keep well away from taking sides on party political issues or political controversies. When Gary Lineker was asked yesterday whether he stood by his tweet comparing the language used to launch the government's new asylum policy with 1930s Germany, he said he did.
Do you stand by what you said in your tweet?
Of course.
Thank you.
Lineker added yesterday, well, it's been an interesting couple of days. Happy that this ridiculously out-of-proportion story seems to be abating, and very much looking forward to presenting Match of the Day on Saturday.
It's enough on Leicester, we're moving on.
When Lineker was asked if he's stepping back today, he said, no, they've told me I have to step back. As news emerged, his Match of the Day colleagues Ian Wright and Alan Shearer announced they wouldn't be appearing tomorrow in solidarity.
Well, I think we always look to take proportionate action, and that's what we've done.
But haven't you just kicked it further down the line? Aren't you delaying
the
inevitable?
I don't want to add to the statement. I think we've had very constructive discussions. The statement's very clear, and that's where we are.
It's becoming a crisis, though. You've now got Ian Wright and Alan Shearer pulling out of Match of the Day. Is the programme still going to go ahead?
No, I absolutely respect people's right to make that decision, and BBC Sport have to look at the programme they're going to produce for the weekend as normal.
The political fallout from the decision has been swift.
If you're working for the BBC, you have a responsibility when you're public-facing, whether it's your Facebook accounts or your Twitter feeds or whatever, to still retain that element of impartiality.
I gave no financial advice to the Prime Minister.
Critics point to BBC chairman Richard Sharp remaining in position while he faces criticism for his role in facilitating an £800,000 loan for then Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Alan Sugar posted this controversial tweet about Jeremy Corbyn, but was allowed to carry on presenting The Apprentice.
I think it's a bad decision, and I think it's a dangerous decision, because this isn't about Gary Lineker. This is about a BBC that I'm afraid is pandering and cowering in the face of creeping right-wing authoritarianism inside the government.
The BBC says tomorrow's Match of the Day will now focus on match action without studio presentation or punditry. The Gary Lineker controversy has ratcheted up to a new level. Whether this is a temporary substitution for Match of the Day or a parting of the ways between its star presenter and the corporation isn't clear.
Goodbye.
And Neil is with me now. I mean, it's astonishing how this has escalated just in the space of the few hours since this story broke. And it's clear that it hinged around this one tweet, but has just become something so much bigger.
Absolutely. It started with a tweet, and yet a tweet that has... some people said at the time it was overshadowing a very important debate on this controversial asylum policy. And yet here we are at the end of this week, Julie. This is a toxic cocktail. You've got free speech involved, BBC impartiality, government policy. Put that all together, and there is a danger that this is morphing into a crisis which is potentially existential for the BBC. That's how serious this could be. This is, after all, a world-class institution founded on impartiality and independence. It's bedrock. It has an outstanding reputation. It occupies a unique place in public life, as we know. And yet much of this week, it's come under consistent attack from the government over its handling of this issue. Tonight, it's come under fire from critics who don't like what it's done over Gary Lineker today in particular. There's a quote from George Orwell's Animal Farm on the BBC's new broadcasting house next to his statue, which reads, "If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear." I think it's worth reflecting on those words tonight at the end of a very frenzied week.
We'll see where it goes tomorrow and beyond. To Neil, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, this all began with the launch of Rishi Sunak's new migration policy, of course. Today, he headed to Paris to strike a deal on that very subject with President Macron, and it was an expensive trip. Over the next 3 years, Britain will pay France nearly £500 million to try to tackle the issue. After a rocky period of Anglo-French relations post-Brexit, the two leaders put on a very public display of bonhomie. It marked, they said, a new beginning, an entente renewed.
When asked about Emmanuel Macron, former PM Liz Truss said the jury was out. But for Rishi Sunak...
Is France a friend or foe, Prime Minister?
The verdict is clear, and the French president seems to feel the same way. This felt like friendship, bromance, and then all-out Love Actually.
I feel very fortunate to be serving alongside you and incredibly excited about the future that we can build together. Merci, mon ami.
But it wasn't just hugs, there was business too, including a new package to try to stop the thousands of asylum seekers and migrants crossing the Channel. Between 2014 and 2023, the UK paid £232 million to France to patrol beaches and intercept boats. Today's deal massively increases our contribution, with payments totalling £478 million over just 3 years, and will include the creation of a new detention centre in northern France. But will throwing money at this challenge really work when previous attempts did not prevent a record 45,000 people crossing the Channel last year?
You talked in terms about our previous investment. Actually, Emmanuel mentioned it in his remarks. Right? 50 different criminal gangs broken, almost 500 arrests made.
Thank you so much.
Sources said the new centre would be near Dunkirk and see people detained and removed to safe countries. But there was very little detail beyond that and questions over whether it could face political resistance. After all, the Foreign Secretary doesn't fancy one in his backyard.
They've got a lot of work done.
Why don't you want a detention centre in your own constituency? If you believe in the policy, why wouldn't you want a detention centre in your constituency?
But what we're working on today is to make sure that we prevent these things happening at source.
But one local politician said the plan will not prevent the problem at source, arguing that it's far too late by the time people get to France.
Maybe they are going to create a new center to maintain people. Those people will escape and will try to go over to Britain. So that means it's not a Franco-British problem, it's a genuine European problem.
President Macron returning to the palace after a meeting with Rishi Sunak that marks the start of a very different personal relationship between the two leaders. The question now is whether it will make much of a difference to policy. Because back home, Rishi Sunak needs to make progress on the policy of small boats. He'll be hoping that the French president has today helped to give him some political cover.
And Anushka's still in Paris tonight, and inevitably there's a lot of attention to this row back in London, but crucial to examine the headlines out of Paris today, Anushka, the clear headlines out of that on the plans for trying to tackle the migrant crisis. Clear headlines, but not a lot of detail.
Yeah, that's right. We have just had the communique and there is that plan for illegal migration in there. I have to say, quite far down the list. It's the 7th item out of 8 listed, but it is there. So the question then is, will it work? In terms of that extra money, as I said, record numbers have been coming despite money in the past. The government wants to push up the number of boats intercepted to over 70%. But with 80,000 people expected to cross the Channel this year, that could still be quite a lot going through. In terms of the detention centre, we're told that it's likely to be near Dunkirk, but as you say, not much detail. We don't know the capacity. We're not sure of the timeline, although they say it could be modular, so coming on bit by bit. There could be legal challenges. And look, both of those things come alongside the centrepiece, if you like, the small boats bill, saying that they will detain and deport almost everyone who crosses the Channel for a deterrent effect. Now, I don't think you want me to mention Gary Lineker, so I won't, but there are many others who are critical of that, sceptical of whether it will really work, even inside government. Rishi Sunak is convinced it will, and he is gambling his political future on it.
OK, Anushka, thank you very much indeed for that. To events in Germany now and the horrifying scenes at a Jehovah's Witness hall in Hamburg last night. We now know that a gunman who entered the building killed 7 people, including an unborn baby. The child's mother survived. The attacker then took his own life, and while his motive remains unclear, police have revealed he was on their radar. Previously a member of the congregation, he was visited by officers only last month following a tip-off, but they decided not to take away his gun.
The gunman began firing in the car park, then through a window, before climbing into the hall where 36 members of the evangelical church were worshipping. 24 more watched the horror unfold online. The shooting stopped soon after the police arrived and began tending to victims. But one more gunshot was heard on an upper floor. The gunman had taken his own life. But he'd also ended the lives of 4 men, 2 women and an unborn baby. The mother, who was 7 months pregnant, survived. He's been identified by the German authorities only as Philip F., a former Jehovah's Witness who'd left the group voluntarily, but not on good terms. The police revealed he'd acquired a licensed automatic handgun only 3 months ago, a gun someone believed he should not be allowed to have.
A tip-off letter suggested that Philip F. could suffer from mental illness and harbored anger towards religious followers, Jehovah's Witnesses and his former employer. Officers made an unannounced visit to his home on February the 7th, but he cooperated and they found firearms regulations were being complied with.
The officers left, satisfied there was no issue. That's likely to renew calls to tighten Germany's rather liberal gun laws. The government has been considering more stringent background checks. Today the police said that simply an anonymous tip-off suggested a mental illness is no legal basis to remove somebody's weapon. The police have said this video is a crucial part of their evidence, even though the student who filmed it didn't realise the full horror of what he was witnessing.
At first I didn't even realise what was happening, so I filmed it with my cell phone, and only through the zoom did I realise that someone was shooting at the Jehovah's Witnesses. And while I was filming that's when I realised what was going on.
His mother told me the community are deeply upset.
It's a real catastrophe because the people who stayed there and prayed or said, we know them because they're always parking in our street, and it's a very nice, calm people, and such awful things happens to them that we really feel very sad and sorry and upset about that.
As Hamburg mourns the victims, more details are emerging of the killer. Yesterday evening he went online to publicise a book he wrote, which he modestly compared favourably to the Bible and the Quran. Then he came here to kill those he apparently disagreed with. Ian Woods, News at 10, Hamburg.
Now, since protests erupted across Iran last year, many people have felt empowered to speak out against the government there for the first time, but they do so knowing the likely brutal response. For some, the risks are too high and they've fled the country, but it hasn't got them out of danger. In her latest special report, Lucy's uncovered how the regime's reach has extended well beyond its borders. Iranians now living in Turkey have been threatened, some even the subject of attempted kidnappings, a sign of the lengths Tehran is willing to go to stifle dissenting voices.
A life on the run isn't easy. Neither is disappearing without a trace. But some have no choice. We spoke to Saman in November when he first escaped to Turkey, after being blinded in his left eye by Iran's security forces during October's protests. He's since had to go underground, but agreed to meet us again. Saman, how are you?
This kind of living, hiding, is too hard. I feel I have to leave this country. This country is it's too near to Iran. Some people close to regime send me messages. They told me, we want to kill you, we want to catch you.
If you went back to Iran, what will happen to you?
100% execution.
It's why the slightest sound makes his eyes dart. Saman trusts very few and has good reason. Do you miss the Navy?
Yeah.
Amir used to be at sea for Iran's Navy for 17 years, until his assignments became too harrowing.
Iran's regime used our ships to carry weapons to Syria for the war. We would take around 20 containers full of munitions every month until 2019.
Knowing he was supplying weapons for war, he couldn't bear to see images of it on television. He asked to leave the military but wasn't allowed, so he escaped, risking jail and execution.
A smuggler took me over the mountains to Turkey illegally. It was minus 27 degrees up there. It was so dangerous, so many people died crossing, but I had no choice.
His survival defied his own belief. But the torment didn't stop when his journey did. Iran's intelligence wanted him back.
I changed my phone 4 times, changed where I lived 3 times. Every time I moved, they found me and would call me.
Then a group of men turned up at his home.
A Mercedes drew up next to my house as I was walking down the street. The men inside were Turkish and Iranian. They tried to get me in the car, tried to convince me they wanted me for the Turkish Navy, but I knew they were lying, so I ran.
11 people have been detained in Turkey for being involved in the plot. But nobody has been arrested over the attempted abduction of Mary, an activist inside Iran for 14 years, who came to this country after being jailed and tortured.
Iran's regime is corrupt. They take any choice away from women.
She's also a keen mountaineer and claims she was lured to this climbing spot with her husband in January, where 4 Iranian men tried to drug and kidnap them.
They gave me an energy drink. I didn't suspect anything until I went dizzy and started to see two of everything. My husband realized what was happening. He got me in the car, slashed their tires, and drove off fast.
Mary came to Turkey in pursuit of safety. She even had to leave her son behind.
I lost my life and my child because of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I'm a mother. I'm a woman. I just want to live in peace.
The threat to dissenting voices beyond Iran's borders is a real one.
They have mercenaries in Turkey who work for the Islamic Republic who pass on information to Iran's intelligence system.
Dr. Ehsan Karamuz helps those who escape from the country. He's familiar with the regime's tactics.
Sometimes they disguise themselves as refugees or religious leaders. And women are also used to trap men. They pretend they are romantically interested, then take these men to places where they can be kidnapped or killed.
30,000 Iranians live in Turkey seeking refuge, hoping to leave violence and despair behind. But the sounds of a different country and the sights of a different city cannot bring a feeling of safety when what you're escaping can follow you. Lucy Watson, News at 10, Turkey.
Incredible, brave voices speaking to Lucy there. Now, not since the days of Chairman Mao has a Chinese leader wielded the kind of power which President Xi Jinping now commands. Today, he embarked on an unprecedented third term, his appointment confirmed by a unanimous vote at the Congress loyal to him. And while China's relations with the US may be at a low point, there were warm words of congratulations for his dear friend from, guess who, Vladimir Putin.
This was performance politics, where everything from the goose-step delivery of the Constitution to the casting of votes was ceremonial. Xi Jinping was the only choice on the ballot, and all 2,952 delegates voted unanimously for him to remain president. The result was greeted with a standing ovation and some rapturous handshakes from his top team.
为建设富强、民主、文明、和谐、美丽的社会主义现代化强国努力奋斗。
When he came to power in 2012, Xi immediately stamped his authority with a domestic anti-corruption campaign. In 2017, he became the first Chinese president to address the World Economic Forum, defending globalization. Xi cemented his grip on the party at last year's Congress, when the unceremonious removal of former President Hu Jintao came to symbolize the end of the old guard. This week, he was also re-elected Commander-in-Chief at a time of rising tensions with the United States. Xi Jinping has elevated himself and China into an incredibly powerful position in the world. The president was described in state media tonight as being the backbone of hundreds of millions of people. Xi Jinping has used his first 10 years in charge to establish his supremacy. He now has 5 more years to wield that power. Debbie Edward, News at 10, Beijing.
Back here, weather warnings for snow and ice remain in force across much of the UK tonight. After blizzard conditions caused chaos for drivers last night, leaving some stranded on the M62 for up to 9 hours in the snow and freezing temperatures. Some motorists had to be helped out by mountain rescue. Today was Prince Edward's 59th birthday, but more significantly, his first as the Duke of Edinburgh. His brother, King Charles, of course, conferred the title on the former Earl of Wessex with his wife Sophie, becoming the Duchess of Edinburgh. It was a title which was held by Charles and Edward's father, Prince Philip, for more than 70 years until his death. Now, St Patrick's Day is a week away, but the party might start a bit early in Los Angeles on Sunday. With a record 14 nominations, Ireland's brightest acting talents could be in for a big night at the Oscars, be it the Banshees of Inisherin, Paul Mescal's standout performance, or the history-making Irish language film The Quiet Girl. There is so much to celebrate. No wonder they're already painting Tinseltown green, and Nina is there as they count down to the ceremony. Great to see you, Nina.
Hello there. Well, I have to say Ireland must be used to this weather, and Hollywood is certainly getting very used to seeing those nominees out and about in the days leading up to the Oscars. As you say, a record number of nominations and a truly historic moment with the nomination for the first Irish language film. Whatever happens Sunday night is going to be quite a party for Ireland.
From the acting talent on screen,
now, I'm sitting here next to you, and if you're going back inside, I'm following you inside, and if you're going...
4 of the stars of the Banshees of Inisherin have been nominated. The film has 9 nods in all.
How's Larkin dealing with it all? He'll be fine.
To high hopes for the short film An Irish Goodbye. Hollywood is saying a big hello to the Irish. Here, an event for the country's success stories to mark an extraordinary year.
Hi, I'm Jessie. Nice to meet you. There's an awful lot of Irish people here tonight.
Thank God. Now the party really starts.
And there's this feeling, once you leave where you're from, that you don't totally belong there again.
There's a first-time Oscar nomination for Paul Mescal. If the 27-year-old Irish will be the young crowned Best Actor. The Quiet Girl has already made history. It's the first Irish language film to get an Oscar nomination. Its young star, who plays a 9-year-old forced to leave her family, is in Hollywood for the awards and enjoying the profile the nomination is giving her home country.
I'm in shock, really, and I'm just so proud and I'm so excited for Ireland. I never would have expected that a film in Irish would get seen in so many different countries, and even people who can't understand it still enjoy the film and appreciate it.
Irish hopes will go well beyond the awards on Sunday night. For many, it is a chance to show off the beauty of Ireland, the language and the culture.
Maeve Croke performed with Riverdance for years before setting up an Irish dance academy in LA. This, she says, is a huge moment for Ireland.
Everyone, back in Ireland and here, all over the world really, are going to be tuning in to watch this year's Oscars.
Has it made you especially proud to be Irish?
Yes, absolutely. I'm always proud to be Irish, but it's just so amazing for such a small country to have 14 nominations. It's like we've already won in my eyes.
Here in Hollywood right now, Ireland has a spring in its step.
So, Nina, so many Irish hopefuls there, but they are up against some massive Hollywood and global competition. How do you rate their chances, do you think?
You know, it is quite an open year this year, Julie, and I think there will be some surprise if Ireland don't win in at least one of the acting categories, looking at the award ceremonies so far. And it's also worth mentioning that there's a nomination for special effects expert Richard Bainham. He won for Avatar in 2010. He's also nominated for the sequel. He's got a really good chance of winning. I should also mention that there is a trade delegation in town led by the Culture Minister, and they're meeting representatives from Sony, from Disney, and that includes people who represent Marvel. So Ireland is very much playing the long game here, representing their country to Tinseltown and the centre of the filmmaking industry, trying to keep business going. So, you know, whatever happens on Sunday night, the impact of all of those nominations, that record number of nominations, will really transcend who wins what on Sunday night. But Ireland, of course, will be rooting for their own, and you never know, it could be a really good night.
I know you'll fill us in with all the details as soon as they come in. Nina, thank you very much indeed. Finally tonight, a romantic ending fit for Hollywood. Thomas Rigby and Charlie Short were stranded at Britain's highest pub last night, but when the skies cleared, there was love in the air. Thomas got down on one knee and proposed. As you might guess, he got the answer he was hoping for. Congratulations to both of them. What a lovely picture. That is all from us here on News at 10. Have a lovely weekend. Good night.